Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tim. And just to say at the start of this, thank you everyone for joining. It's fantastic to see 350 or so people on this call. I think Tim and I started speaking about this webinar meeting about 10 days ago now, so it's amazing to see it up and running so quickly. And I think if there's one positive thing that can come out of this strange situation we find ourselves in, it's this kind of virtual information sharing. So thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Tim, for putting this together. So just to introduce myself, I'm Adele Jones. I'm Head of Programs at the Sustainable Food Trust. The Sustainable Food Trust, for those who don't know, is a small UK-based charity. We work internationally to try and unlock the barriers which are currently preventing a more mainstream transition to sustainable food and farming systems. And today I'm going to speak to you about the need for harmonized metrics from a on-farm perspective. So there's lots of farmers and land managers and estate managers on the webinar, it seems, which is fantastic. And I'm sure many of you can sympathize with the amount of audits that you guys might have to do each year as farmers and land managers. Similarly, there's lots of us, or all of us, who go to the supermarket or the shops to buy food. And again, we're kind of bombarded with different labels and different kind of marketing things, which, to be completely honest, I'm not sure any of us, even myself who spends my time thinking about this sort of stuff, truly understands. So I think there's over 1,000 different sustainability assessments and labels worldwide. I think in the UK there's over 100, probably much more than that. So there's a real need to kind of rationalize this system. And this is something that the Sustainable Food Trust has been thinking about for the last 5 years or so. And we sat down with a group of farmers about probably almost 5 years ago now, and said, predating all the Brexit conversations, and just said to them, look, where are you supplying information to each year? How much does it overlap? And is it at all useful to you in terms of the day-to-day decision-making on farms around sustainability, and defining sustainability in this sense as economic, environmental and societal sort of enhancement and resilience on farms. So we posed that question to the working group of farmers that we sat down with, which was a very kind of broad church group of farmers from across the country, and the resounding answer was no. The information wasn't useful to them, and it wasn't helping them make decisions about their farm businesses. So we thought, okay, this is a bit mad, and we did a gap analysis of some of the sustainability assessment tools alongside the certification schemes that those farmers were involved with, and we found that about 65 to 70% of the data totally overlapped. And it's probably higher actually, but because many of the questions, as you probably all know, within certification, for example, are quite qualitative, it's quite difficult to kind of map those questions exactly onto one another and map the answers onto one another. So actually it's probably around 75% overlap, which we just thought was mad. And so we started discussing this idea of, okay, what would a harmonized framework for on-farm sustainability look like? Who should lead it? And from our point of view, that should be the farmers. The farming industry should lead this. And what would the benefits be? So whilst thinking about it, we thought, well, for farmers, obviously, to monitor continuous environmental, social and economic performance year on year. For governments to assess, design and monitor the impact of future farm support schemes. For food companies to make better purchasing decisions, and then finally for citizens to be able to kind of better understand the relative sustainability of products that they are purchasing, so that they can kind of vote with their buying power and become part of this solution to helping create a better business case for sustainable production. And we really, when thinking about these benefits and thinking about the need for a harmonized framework of on-farm sustainability measures, we thought, well, what's a kind of analogous situation here? And we thought about the financial accounting standards. And it's not a perfect analogy, because in many ways it's too simplistic. But what the financial accounting standards and framework provide, which is set by an independent body, is a common sort of set of terminology and practices upon which all different auditing companies, accountants around the world can use to monitor financial accounts. It means that if you're a small company or a very large company, wherever you are in the world, you can make meaningful comparisons about the financial information that you are accounting for. Whilst at the same time, having one framework for financial accounting does not mean that you just have one company which does the accounting. There's a whole diversity of different, the big four management consultancies, accountants all over the world, software companies. It means that there's multiple different people accounting for financial information, but because there's this one resounding framework, it just brings the whole thing together, and it means that everyone's working towards the same goal. And we sort of thought, okay, well, what does that look like for farming? And again, posed that question to the farmers we were working with, looked at all the information they're currently collecting and supplying to different people, and came up with this quite sort of crude sort of framework of assessment, which here is represented as 10 categories of assessment, from productivity and profitability, which is obviously paramount. If you are a farm business owner or tenant, you want to make sure you're making money, as well as soil health, water quality, plant and crop husbandry, livestock management, and also social and cultural issues as well. And so, as you can imagine, when we came up with these 10 categories, there was quite a exhaustive list of different metrics and indicators which we could put underneath all of those. And so we challenged ourselves as a group, and this again was something that took kind of 2 years, a process that took about 2 years of having multiple meetings about this. We challenged ourselves to try and come up with 3 key metrics and indicators under each of the 10 or 11 categories here in this table. And I realise it's going to be hard for everyone to take this in now, so I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested after this webinar. But this is a table of metrics and indicators which has been 100% led by a group of farmers in terms of development, and it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It takes the best of what they are doing currently, and also obviously incorporating new research and science and measuring techniques as they become available. So we have been testing this framework over the last 3 or 4 years as it's been developing, and those tests have helped continue to refine the metrics and indicators included within it. And we've been taking a whole farm approach, so really trying to measure all these things on any one farm at a certain time, and then kind of using it to help farmers make decisions about, if you tweak your soil health, if you do something which improves your soil health, what impact does that have on your productivity? What impact does that have on your biodiversity? And so on. So you're not thinking about any of these issues in silo. You're thinking about how they interact with one another, and therefore how you can kind of improve the health of your system as a whole each year. Importantly, what we haven't tried to do here is create another assessment, because there is so many of those out there already, as I explained earlier. So what we thought was, if there was one harmonized framework, which as an industry we could all agree collectively that this is what we should all be working towards, and then potentially there could be kind of one integrated audit that farmers do each year, which rather than requires information to be collected in each of these categories, again, it takes information that farmers are already collecting for various places and slots them into a framework of assessment, basically, whether that's your Soil Association organic audit or your RSPCA assured audit for animal welfare, or even things like your GWCT big farmland bird count. The more information that can be plugged into a kind of central space that farmers can use as a management tool, the better. And then, from that, this information and all these various aspects of on-farm sustainability could be used by Defra's ELM team in order to make decisions about funding for public goods. So building on that, we are, the Sustainable Food Trust is one of the ELM test and trial organisations. We started our test and trial back in November. We've been holding a series of farm workshops to further refine the framework of metrics. And we've now got to the point where we are about to start testing it on farm to, again, just, rather than getting too worried about the results, just thinking about how we can use the on-farm tests to further refine refine the metrics and indicators that farmers feel are most useful and meaningful to them on farm, and help them make better decisions each year. So we were about to start that a few weeks ago. Obviously, plans have changed slightly. We can't go to the farms to do the tests anymore, but what we can do is do it over Zoom. So as Matthew said, this is an opportunity to refine our technological skills. And so in itself, doing a farm assessment over Zoom is going to be an interesting one, but I think it will be quite enlightening actually to see how easy it is or not. So those are starting next week, which is really exciting. We've got, there's actually more dots to be added now. We've got about 25 to 30 farms across England, which we're going to be testing the framework on to get their feedback on the metrics and indicators. And yeah, so that should be done in the next 3 months, basically. And keep an eye out on our website. As those reports come in, we're going to be posting regular updates on those farm trials as we get them through. And this is a slightly broader point, which I wanted to mention, which links to our Elm trial, but it is slightly broader. So I spent a year working for Defra last year for 12 months, which was a really fascinating experience. I learned a lot. It gave me a lot of insights into how things work in the kind of belly of the beast, as it were. One of the things which did really stand out to me was quite how siloized these different teams within Defra are. So we've got the 25-year environment plan, environmental land management, the new regulatory regime for farming, we've got enhanced animal welfare standards, and then kind of quite apart from all that, we've got nutrition and public health. And Defra is not alone in this. I think it's quite natural in a way for government departments to go into these kind of siloized groups because it's easier to deliver. But it did really worry me from this perspective of multiple different farm audits and farmers under pressure to do lots of assessments each year, that even from Defra themselves there could be 3 or 4 different ways of measuring farm sustainability going forward, from ELM, from the new regulatory regime, from animal welfare, and even from the 25-year environment plan. And actually what's really needed is a kind of single approach, which if Defra could harmonise their thinking and their indicators that they are developing, so that individual farm information can be scaled up to catchment and regional and national, as Jenny was saying in her presentation. It would make far more sense and make everyone's lives much easier. And at the same time, hopefully it would mean that there would be one way of communicating the benefits that farmers provide to the public, who are equally kind of confused about where their money as taxpayers is going and how well it's being spent. I just wanted to touch on the Welsh Government, because we're not just working with Defra here, we're working with the devolved nations as well. The Welsh Government has actually committed to introducing an annual sustainability audit on farms, which is what we are suggesting to Defra they should do as part of our ELM trial. So the objective of our ELM trial is to consider whether an annual farm sustainability audit could be used as a mechanism for farmers understanding their progress against achieving the outcomes they agree with Defra that they will deliver through ELM. So we've been speaking about this idea to the Welsh Government as well, and they have committed to introducing what they are calling the Farm Sustainability Review, which will be an annual farm assessment that every farmer in Wales will complete in order to gain access to their new sustainable farming scheme, which is really exciting. This is a really exciting project, and in many ways I think the Welsh Government is slightly further ahead in their thinking in terms of how kind of environmental land management can integrate within farming. And I think that's a really important point. I think actually the sustainable farming scheme is a much better name than ELM, because ELM is restricted to just thinking about the environment, and actually we should really be thinking about a whole farm approach to future support. So I think the sustainable farming scheme encompasses that, and with the Farm Sustainability Review as part of that scheme, I think it could be really strong. So watch this space with the Welsh Government. This is just a scan of Farmers Guardian last week, which hopefully some of you might have seen. This is a profile of our work, which was brilliant. It sort of explained how Defra could use the metrics. There was some comments in there from Sainsbury's and Nestle and the NFU, and also a perspective about how it could be used from a trading standpoint as a kind of harmonized framework of metrics. And that's the point I wanted to end on, actually. There's obviously a part of this I mentioned at the beginning, that consumers are equally confused about what all the different labels on food products mean. And we think this is not something we've done a huge amount of work looking at, but we certainly think it's a really interesting idea to consider whether there might be an opportunity to have a harmonized sort of label on food products with a number of indicators which consumers easily can kind of recognize and understand. Kind of not necessarily replacing the farm assurance schemes, because I think they're there for a reason and consumers trust them in some cases. But I think there's a need for, particularly young people now wanting to know more about their food and where it comes from. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity here to communicate some of the benefits that farmers will be delivering, hopefully through ELM and through the Sustainable Farming Scheme in Wales. Why not use that information and communicate it outwards on food products? And you'll notice here that these carrots have a little $sign on them, and that was purposeful because, as I mentioned, I think it would be really interesting if we could, if we could have the same label on products in the US and all around the world, that we could then kind of use as a trading platform, basically for making sure that produce is being traded on kind of equal standards on sustainability. So yeah, that's me. That's everything, I think. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to hopefully having some time to answer some questions at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adele. Again, incredibly comprehensive overview of kind of the direction of travel for the sector and some of the things we need to be putting in place. So thank you so much for that.